Joining us now to discuss the Nasdaq cyber attack is Francis DeSouza, Senior Vice President of Symantec, and Paul Kocher, President of Cryptography Research. Thank you both so much for joining us. So, Francis, let me start with you. With the NSA getting involved here, how serious is this?
I think one of the things that points to is, as the current administration has said, a vast portion of this country's critical infrastructure is actually run by private companies. And so this is a recognition of the fact that Nasdaq is considered part of the nation's critical infrastructure. So it's not surprising for them to get involved.
Paul, how about you? What do you think is the significance of the NSA wanting to be part of this investigation, needing to be part of this investigation?
Well, it really means that they think that this is not just an attack by ordinary cyber criminals, but this is something involving nation states. The NSA doesn't usually get involved in crimes where the goal is to put somebody in jail. They get involved, as we were saying just a second ago, in real national security issues. And what this suggests here is that the integrity of the U.S. markets and the systems surrounding those really is a very important national security issue and is worthy of the attention of the National Security Agency.
Wait, is that crystal clear that if it is NSA, then it's not an investigation of someone trying to use this for illegal trading? It's a foreign government?
Foreign government or a major cyber threat at sort of the national security level. It doesn't mean that the FBI may get involved and prosecute somebody, or the CIA may have some response. So there can be other organizations involved as well. But the NSA doesn't usually have, their people showing up in court with evidence and little baggies to show who is responsible. They're really focused on trying to deal with the national security issues.
Because there's an insider trading trial going on right now that's about leaking of confidential documents from board meetings to people on Wall Street, allowing them to trade in advance of the announcements of those things. This director's desk was exactly that, a place where such confidential documents were kept.
And the significance of the NSA being involved here suggests this is a case of vastly greater importance and consequence than a single hedge fund trading on inside information.
Francis, the NSA also got involved with the hack on Google back in 2009. What do you know about how this attack on the Nasdaq compares to what happened to Google?
There are a lot of comparisons between the two that make sense. One is the sophistication of the attack. At the time, the Hydra attacks, the Google attacks, were among the most sophisticated attacks we had seen. And we know that this attack was very sophisticated. The second comparison I think that's worth making is in the Google attacks, the target was not the infrastructure. The goal wasn't to take down Google. The goal was to steal information. And it looks like that's the motive here. The intent was not to come in and take down infrastructure, but get at valuable information. The information assets themselves were the target.
Paul, tell me about the technology that goes into it. I know it's very difficult to kind of unwind how these things happen. Does anybody ever actually get caught?
Usually no, because when you're mounting an attack over the internet, you can use a string of different infected computers to launder the packets or the malicious software that you're trying to push out. So if you're tracing one of these attacks back, you can trace to the last computer in the chain, but figuring out who's controlling that machine and the ones behind it is very difficult. So often it's tempting to assume that this is, the source is the computer that's mounting the attack. So if it's a computer in China, people will assume it's an attack from China. But you really can't be sure of that. The lack of a tie between people and geography to packets on the internet makes it very, very difficult to do these kinds of investigations.
Now, when I was talking in my sidebar about director's desk being the target, we know that to be the case. I was pretending as if I knew that that's where it ended. We don't know that it went any further than that. But is it a common technique to go in one door to get to the rest of the house?
Absolutely. So you'll break into one computer and then use that as a launching point onto the next. So if you have a badly configured firewall or a piece of hardware on the periphery of a network, that'll be very often the first thing that gets compromised, and then you'll leverage the attack going through a network. Especially when networks aren't fully online, like you have compartments or you've got computers that are offline. The attacker can't instantly go to the ultimate target, but they'll need to go through a chain of intermediate systems.
Now, Francis, let me ask you, not to be crass about it, but when these kinds of things happen, does Symantec see more business? Do you guys, do people, your customers start to realize, I got to start taking this stuff more seriously than I have been because there are greater threats out there?
It's clear that we're seeing an escalation of the threat landscape. Over the last few years, in fact, we've seen the evolution where attacks used to be driven by hackers. So it used to be people trying to in some cases even teenagers, trying to break into companies and take them down. But over the last few years, we've seen that evolution where it's now more sophisticated attackers. It's either organized criminals like the Russian business network, or in some cases, it's actually gangs that have connections to nation states. That's all resulted in an escalation, if you like, of the threat landscape, while at the same time, companies are realizing that they have more assets to protect than ever before. It's not just their physical assets anymore, but it's also their information assets.
Francis, I buy that, but if people aren't getting busted, if we don't have arrests, how do we really know that these imaginary thugs are out there? Not thugs, sophisticated crooks trying to get insider information or trying to damage companies?
Well, we know in a couple of ways. One way is we are actually seeing people getting busted and getting prosecuted. You're seeing what's happening with WikiLeaks, for example, where we know exactly what happened, we know how it happened, and there's a lot of activity around it. And then in other cases, companies are just telling us they know that data has been stolen, right? They actually see the result of the data being stolen. They see money being moved, they see their designs being copied by other companies, and so there's very tangible evidence that information has been stolen, even in the cases where the perpetrators aren't actually caught.
All right, Francis DeSouza and Paul Kocher, thank you so much for your insights. We will be closely following this investigation.